Hello everyone, my name's Cliff and welcome back to my channel. This is Cliff's Dark Gems. Today I'm going to be wrapping up the week of Weird and I'm going to be presenting the one and only book that I've read during this week, and that is China Mieville, Perdido Street Station. Stay tuned. First of all, I found it very interesting that I am now reviewing a book that is a crazy blend of fantasy, science fiction, horror, even steampunk, whereas this is normally a channel where I read and review horror, novels and short stories, so that is something kind of strange and it's outside of my comfort zone. Secondly, I finished this book last night. And seriously, I had to put my head in my hands. I stared straight ahead for 5 minutes and I was thinking, what the hell did I just read? It was a bit of a gut punch, but I'm not going to say anything more about that. This is a spoiler-free review, so I'm going to try and give as little away as possible when I talk about this book. First of all, I'd like to talk about the spectacular world building in this book. Now, I've read many novels, fantasy novels, from J.R.R. Tolkien to Raymond Feist, and for each one of those novels there is a massive scope. There is a world. In the beginning of the novel there you'll find hundreds of maps and different places where the novel takes place. This is very different in this story. This takes place in one city, and the fact that he's able to achieve such an immersive, powerful story, world building within this one city, I think just tells us something about his skill and his ability as a writer. Now let's talk about the city and the setting. The city's name is New Crabuzon, I believe, and it is grimy, it is filthy, it is nasty, it's pretty shitty, it's covered in slums, and there is threatening danger everywhere you turn. Now what he manages to do with the setting is he writes in such a descriptive, such a beautiful way that he turns to this dark place into something strangely beautiful, which actually reminds me a little bit of Clive Barker. He also takes very dark settings, and because he is so descriptive and because his writing is so just incredible, he manages to make even the darkest thing somehow brighten up. Somehow he gives these things a little bit of a light. Now the city is full of slums and poverty everywhere you look, and the government, which is very corrupt, rules with an iron fist and rules through fear. Now there's militia men everywhere. Basically there's these tall towers throughout the city and these airships that monitor the population. There is crime aplenty, and one of the most extreme ways of punishment is something called a remaking. When humans or any of the other myriad creatures in this world commit a crime, even if it's just a minor crime, they can suffer remaking. Now this is something intensely cruel, where metal is kind of put over your body, over parts of your body. You can imagine walking around with this metal limb and the rest of your body is normal, or having a metal plate across your mouth so you can no longer speak. And there's one section in the book where this happens, where the perpetrator then decides to cut a jagged mouth and make his own mouth. Obviously intensely painful, but he doesn't want to sip out of his nose. It is a very hectic punishment, and it almost like, it's weird because then you got these strange, almost robotic cyberpunk creatures walking around the city as well. So that is called remaking. Okay, let's speak about characters now. The city is populated with a huge range of different races, cross species, humans, mutants, even machines, sentient machines, believe it or not. And there are important characters in this novel, big and small, but for the sake of this particular review, I'm going to just be focusing on three main characters towards the beginning of the novel. For the first third of the novel, they are very important. First of all, we have the flawed main character, the main protagonist of the story, who is Isaac. Now, Isaac is almost like a mad scientist type. He's sort of estranged from the university because he's obsessed with following his own ideas and his own theories about science. He's obsessed with problem solving, and he becomes a very important character throughout the novel. But he's also very unlikable, and in fact, in some ways, I kind of despised him in the way he treated creatures later on. I won't go into the details, but he does have two saving graces, which actually gives me a little bit more of hope for him as a character. He is in love with a character called Lynn, who is a Khepri artist. Now, a Khepri is a half human, half almost insect creature with a giant scarab beetle on her head. That's how I picture it anyway. And their love life, their affair is kind of frowned upon. But the fact of the matter is that he adores Lynn and will do anything for her. And this makes me feel for him as a character. As unlikable in other ways as he is, the fact that he is totally devoted to her as a character that he loves gives me some hope. Now, Lynn is also a complicated character in that she strives for independence. She left her commune, her people, who live in a very traditional way, and so she's a little bit of an outcast herself, and also choosing to be with a human is something that is frowned upon. And she, as an artist, she is ambitious. She wants to go somewhere and she wants to find her true purpose in life. But mostly it is his devotion to helping Jagarek, a half man, half bird, also called Garuda, who comes to the city seeking aid, that really makes me start rooting for Isaac, because he becomes completely devoted to this cause. Now, Jagarek committed a terrible crime to his people, and he was exiled and basically had his wings cut off, and now he's come in search of this scientist because he wants to fly again, and he will do anything to fly again, and Isaac seeks to help him. Now, Jagarek is immensely likable, definitely my favorite character in the novel, and he's kind of a tragic character at the same time. He has a way about him. He's incredibly courageous, incredibly brave and devoted, and becomes very devoted to the cause. And I'm not going to say anything how I feel about this character develops, but I'll leave that for you to discover for yourselves. There are other characters that become very important later on in the novel, some large, some small, but I don't want to give away any spoilers. I'd rather you discover those characters on your own. The basic plot at the beginning of the novel, and I'm really not going to go too much into it, is that Jacob goes all out to help Jagarek achieve his dream of flight. He gets all these flying creatures, both legally and by illegal means as well, and gets them into his scientific studio or whatever, puts them in cages in order to observe them and try and find out as much about them as possible. However, he unwittingly starts a chain of events, starts with this little caterpillar, and this leads to absolute catastrophe, and darkness descends over the city and its inhabitants, and all hell breaks loose. Now, I'm not going to give away too many spoilers, but I will say, because it is mentioned on the back of the cover, that there are some aliens in this book that are absolutely fascinating, and some of the best stuff that I've ever read is in this novel. Meanwhile, Lynn is given a very dangerous, lucrative offer from a top gangster in the city, and she kind of accepts, even though this might not be in her best interest. And she goes and has to paint a portrait, or do her thing with her art and create, I think it's a sculpture. Okay, let's talk very briefly about his writing style. Now, as I mentioned before, it is incredibly creative, incredibly deep. Maybe there's too much depth, and maybe sometimes it's a little bit too dense, especially when describing certain scenes like action scenes. But we'll get to that a bit later. But it is still incredibly effective. It allows you to immerse yourself into this world, this crazy schizophrenic world, and I really enjoyed reading this book. Okay, so let's just quickly go over again what I liked. Number one, incredible world building. It takes place just in a single city, but the city comes to life through his writing. It becomes a character, an important character, and you get immersed into this dirty, dark, threatening world. Second of all, some of the characters that he creates are just so varied, so imaginative. There are all sorts of weird and wonderful species. I want you to discover them for yourselves, so I'm not going to talk about them, but they're half-breeds, there's mutants, as I mentioned. They're these weird creatures that have been unmade or remade, and I really the imagination runs riot in the city. And lastly, the aliens. Now, I'm not going to give any specifics, but I think there's definitely a nod to Lovecraft here. But they are truly some of the most interesting, fascinating creatures I've ever read about, and any time that they were on the page I was enthralled. So really, I'm not giving any spoilers away, but read this book. It really takes off in the second half. In the first half it is a little bit slow, world building, but it really takes off and becomes very exciting in the second half of the novel. Okay, just a few things about what I didn't like so much. First of all, sometimes the writing was a bit dense. When he was describing mathematical formulas or scientific formulas, it's almost like he was trying to be a little bit too clever, and he would spend 2-3 pages talking about a specific theory, and it just got a little bit much. Also, sometimes the pacing for me was a bit off in the second half. Between the action scenes, some of the decisions made by some of the characters seemed a little bit illogical, but overall I still found it a fascinating, immersive, engaging, exciting read, and I would recommend this book for anyone. Okay everyone, so there you have it, my week of weird read, which was Perdido Street Station, and I think it can definitely be classified as new weird. And I'm looking forward to reading a little bit more of China Mieville after this. I think I'll probably look up I think A City in the City. I have actually read King Rat, but that was very different to this, and I'm looking forward to reading a little bit more of this author. Although not strictly horror, there were definitely horror elements in it, and yeah, a fascinating read. And thank you so much for watching. So take care everyone, keep those pages turning, and cheers.